Happy New Year! Happy 2026! And welcome to this traditional recording that I prepare every single start of the year, every beginning of the new year, where I introduce the latest and greatest of the course environment that I'm gonna use in the new intakes coming up this new year. I'm gonna use the same slide deck as I used in the past, but obviously with some changes reflecting the new frameworks that I've introduced and the changes introduced, but you will see that there are minor changes. So the course environment at this point is very stable. And as usual, I'm organizing the content in these three main sections. I'm going to introduce the project for those of you who are not familiar with it. Then I will go through the two main paths for installation, and then the first steps to make it work and validate that your course environment is properly deployed. So I called this project OSBDET, Open Source Big Data Educational Toolkit, as you will see in a moment, but you can see it as a local big data cloud environment because in a sense you're going to use it in a similar way. You're going to have a web user interface, a web portal where you're going to be able to enable some big data technologies, and you're going to be able to use them to connect them and implement some small use cases, some small projects. But you don't have to think of this course environment as a environment for real projects. So that's not the goal of this environment. So it's more a playground, it's more a sandbox that my students use for labs that we do in our classes and for the group assignments that they need to work on. You're going to see some big data technologies on it, and they are big data technologies that most of the companies out there are using. So you will see some of them in a moment. But again, so if you want to use real data sets with this course environment, I can guarantee you that that is going to break for sure because it's not designed for that. However, whatever you do on this course environment can be easily extrapolated to enterprise class type of environments. So these public cloud environments where you have storage, ingestion, processing, and stuff can be configured in a way that can be taking what you already built on this course environment, but in a production class deployment. When it comes to the contents, everything is organized in these different phases, what I call big data pipeline or data value chain. So you can see technologies such as NiFi for data ingestion. I believe NiFi is a very powerful tool with very user-friendly user interface that you can use through the web browser. Therefore, very easy for people getting introduced to these topics. Then some technologies for storage, Min.io, which is an S3 compatible object store, HDFS as a representation of a distributed file system, Kafka for streaming storage. We're going to store events here, or we usually store events here that you can then process with Spark streaming. So Spark is one of those processing technologies that we use once we are covering processing. Hadoop MapReduce is here for historical purposes. So I really like to go through how MapReduce was used in the past. Then you see the complexity, and then you appreciate Spark that much because definitely it's much easier to use. When it comes to serving, I ship technologies such as MongoDB, operational NoSQL, MariaDB, a relational database, and ClickHouse for analytics at scale. So ClickHouse, for instance, could be considered for processing as well, but I prefer to put it into the serving layer because for the contents that I'm delivering in my courses, so it fits much better in this phase. Then, of course, Jupyter is going to be used for building those notebooks relying on Spark. So we are using Python with PySpark just to build some Spark notebooks, Spark applications. Then Grafana and Superset for visualization, Superset more on the BI side, Grafana more on the operational side. And then a couple of technologies that you can find on the course environment, but we don't use because we don't have time to go over then is orchestra and open metadata. So orchestra for orchestration and open metadata for data governance and data quality. So if you want to explore this further, so definitely feel free to explore it. Yeah, probably heads up when it comes to open metadata. So it's very demanding. Probably you need to have a lot of memory. And so by default, as I will explain in a moment, the course environment use 4 gigabytes of RAM, which is a very limited amount of data, but I can tell you the labs that we go through during the classes are just leveraging this amount of memory without any problem. Open metadata, you want to explore it, so I highly recommend to have at least 8 gigabytes of virtual memory. Otherwise, it's going to break. So it won't start. All right. So in real scenarios, you will see all the technologies on different deployments, different machines, different clusters, and then definitely you need to connect them all if you want to make them work together, which is challenging. And so it's definitely not what I want to go through image courses. However, what I'm doing here is to bundle everything together into a virtual machine that you can leverage through VirtualBox or UTM, depending on the computer that you have. More of this in a moment. This is an open source project, so actually it's available on GitHub. So there is a GitHub repo where you can access the code to build the environment. So definitely I'm not building these technologies myself. I don't have that knowledge. I wish I could build all this technology by myself, but yeah, definitely that's not doable. So what this project is about is a bunch of shell scripts, downloading and configuring the technologies to be used together. And definitely if you find something that could be done in a better way, so feel free to step in, feel free to open a pull request. I will review the pull request, and if it makes sense, I will add it to the main project and it will be considered for next releases. And so this is the 5th or 6th version that I'm releasing, and so definitely I'm evolving this project over time, and the main evolution goes into using the latest and greatest versions of the different frameworks. So you can see that this time I'm shipping the latest NiFi version, the latest Kafka version. Sometimes, as it is the case of Spark, I cannot release the latest version because it's breaking the labs. And that's the main goal of this course environment. It's a tool that I use in my classes just to complement the theory. Therefore, I'm just bringing the frameworks that are compatible with the labs and always trying to get the latest and greatest version. So Spark 4, unfortunately, is not compatible with the current labs. I need to introduce large changes, and which is not a big deal, but I also hit a bug, and yeah, apparently there is no solution at this point, and so I don't want to jeopardize the use of this course environment because I'm using something which is buggy, and then probably fix it or being able to patch it is not guaranteed, right? So I prefer to be conservative in that sense, and so that's why I'm shipping this course environment with Spark 3.5.7, which is the latest version of the Spark 3 branch. All right, so when it comes to the installation, you need to identify the type of laptop or computer you have before you can move on. So there are 2 different paths. So the Intel compatible processor path, which is basically related to those Windows machines with Intel, an Intel-based processor, which are most of the Windows machines. There are some new Windows machines shipping ARM64 related processor, and such as the Snapdragon. Those Windows machines are not compatible at this point. So maybe in the future, but not right now, because I don't have access to one of these machines, and so I was unable to work on a compatible version. So if you have a Windows machine, you need to be sure that your Windows machine has an Intel compatible processor, which is an Intel processor or AMD 64 processor, or you're using an old Apple machine. So you have a MacBook which is older than 2021, So it's very likely that it has an Intel compatible processor. And if you have a new Apple computer, that's fine. So there is a version which is compatible with the Apple Silicon processor, and you will see how to make it work. If you have an Apple computer and you are unsure, then you can identify which kind of processor your Apple computer has by checking the About This mug. Go straight into the chip section, and then you will see if you have an Apple M1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5, which is an Apple Silicon processor, or you have an Intel processor. If you have an Intel processor, that means you need to go down this road. So that's the first thing that you need to check. The second thing that you need to check is the amount of resources. So these are the minimum requirements. So definitely a modern processor, meaning that it's not older than 4 years. So 4 or 5 years, it's going to be in the limit. Then in terms of physical memory, it should have 16 gigs of RAM. 8 gig might work because, again, the virtual machine has 4 gigabytes of memory, but there will be some demanding labs that are going to take the course environment to the limits and your computer to the limits. So it's better that you have 16 gigs. Then when it comes to hard disk, you need to have at least 50 gigs of available space. So the file you have to download is 10 gigs size. When you uncompress this file, it takes 20 additional gigs, so that means it's going to take like 30 gigs. Definitely you can remove the file that you download once you uncompress that file, but the virtual disk on the virtual machine is 50 gigs big. So that means as you are adding new technologies or new files or whatever it is, the virtual disk is going to expand up to 50 gigs. So that's why you should have this amount of space available. Otherwise, it will break at some point. So for those of my students with non-compliant laptops, yeah, you might struggle to make labs work. You will get best effort support from my side, but I highly suggest that you acquire a laptop with these minimum requirements. And we got to the point where you need to choose the right journey. So you have a Windows machine with an Intel-based processor, or you have an old Apple computer with an Intel processor. This is going to be your journey. If you have a new Apple computer with an Apple Silicon processor, this is going to be your journey. So you have an old Apple computer with an Intel processor, or you have a Windows machine with an Intel compatible processor, Intel processor, or AMD 64 processor. So that means that's the journey you need to follow. So it's important that you are 100% sure that this is what you have. Otherwise, jump straight into the UTM journey. All right, so you need to download VirtualBox. You need to download the image. If you already have VirtualBox on your machine, be sure that you have the latest and greatest version, which is 6.2.4. That doesn't mean that virtual machines that you already have are going to be removed. That's not the case. So you're going to update VirtualBox, and the virtual machines that you already have there are going to be kept. Once you have this file, you need to click Import or File, Import Appliance. You need to select the file that you already downloaded. You can double check the description of the details of the virtual machine by going into this section, settings section, and then you click the Finish button, and this is going to start the process. After a while, the course environment is going to be available over here. So you have more virtual machines, then you will have more than one item. All right, so let me leave the presentation here. And yeah, so when it comes to the file that you need to download, you need to go straight into the releases within the OSBDET GitHub repo, and this is the file you need to download. So a couple of things in here. This file is something that I uploaded, so it's very unlikely that someone replays this content. But in the case of you want to be 100% sure that the file that you're downloading is the file that I uploaded, here you have the hash algorithm applied on top of the file. So if you use the SHA-SUM utility on Mac with these parameters minus A256 and the file that you download, you should get this number in here. Something started by 8B6 and ending in 562, which is basically what you have in here, right? So that means it is the file that I uploaded. So once you upload it, again, import, identify the file that you downloaded, which is this one, expand the settings just to be sure that you're downloading the right version, 2026, release 1, click finish. Yeah, we agree on the license, that's fine, and that's going to start the process. So this is on the slow computer, and yeah, I can tell you this is going to take a couple of minutes. So in the meantime, let me move on with the presentation. Once the import is done, double check the settings. As you can see, the virtual machine has 4 gigs of RAM. This is the total amount of memory on this laptop, 16 gigs. So that means I could increase this value. So actually on my deployment, the one that I use on a daily basis, I'm using 8 gigs. So half the size, this number is going to be in the safe zone. Pretty much the same with virtual CPUs. Virtual CPUs are going to be specified over here, and this is the total amount of physical CPUs. So half this number is going to be safe. So that's actually the default value in here, but if you review the settings and you see something like 8, yeah, it's fine to use 4 CPUs. That's going to make your course environment faster, or it's going to help you or allow you to run more frameworks or more technologies concurrently. During the import process, you might get errors, an error like this one. So this might happen because you don't have enough space available. So I try to make some room. So definitely the closer to 50 gigs, the better. It might happen that you didn't download the file properly, so do it one more time, or it might be something else. So you check this VirtualBox failed to import appliance to for causes and fixes on the internet. You will find some other causes to consider. And once everything is done, then we go straight into the operations. So once you have this item in here, right click it, start with that GUI. That's going to kick it off. We are going to do some, we're going to take some first step later, but for the moment, leave it here. And this should work. You might get an error, more on this in a moment, but this is the way you're going to start it up. We don't need to use the console, so there is no UI, there is no user interface configured. Everything is going to be used through the web browser or through Jupyter. And so that's the way to ship all these technologies on this virtual machine, because we are removing elements that are not necessary for what we are going to do. Once you are done, the way to stop it is by right-clicking the item, stop and shut down. So that's the proper way of shutting it down, and that's going to guarantee that no corruption on the course environment happens. If you had some corruption, that's not the end of the world. You can remove it and download it from scratch, or download it once again and start from scratch. So that's the way you should proceed. And when you are running this VirtualBox on an Apple computer, you might get an error like this one. So this is because the drivers installed by VirtualBox are blocked by the operating system. So you go to System Preferences, Security and Privacy, and you click this Allow button. You need to restart the computer, and then you should be able to make it work. So let's look into our deployment. There you go. So we have it in here. Right click, start with that GUI. Then you will see some messages in here. You will see a blue box, which is definitely positive. And at some point you will see some additional messages. And at some point you will see 2 lines, which are the welcome message and the login prompt. So yeah, that means everything is ready to be used. You see some messages very small over here, and yeah, they disappear, and that's all. So I'm gonna do this just to validate what I'm talking about. Let me click this. So there you go. These are the two lines that I mentioned before. You shouldn't do this because now you click this button here, it's going to stop, but it's not going to stop in the right way. So yeah, so in order to avoid issues, don't do this. And once you're done, shut it down like this. Then yeah, that's going to be removed. This will disappear at some point. There you go. And that means everything is closed and you're ready to move on with your life. If you have a new Apple computer, those relying on Apple Silicon processor, then UTM journey is the path that you have to follow. So remember, you have an old Mac computer, an old Apple computer, or you have a Windows machine with an Intel processor, Intel compatible processor, then yeah, you need to follow the VirtualBox journey. Otherwise, you will end up installing something that is not going to work out, or maybe you won't be able to install it at all. Okay, so pay attention to this part and be sure that you are following the right journey. So in this case, we are going to use UTM 4.7.4, which is the latest and greatest version of UTM at the moment. You need to download this virtual machine for UTM from the GitHub repo. This is going to give you a zip file that you need to uncompress, and you will have this file in the end. So the zip file that you downloaded can be removed, and that's going to bring some room to your hard disk. So that's no longer needed. If you have plenty of space, leave it there just in case you corrupt or you break the course environment. Then you don't need to download the zip file again. So it's going to be there. You can uncompress it and you can move on. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So from UTM file open, and you select this file, and there you go. You will have your brand new course environment. In order to make it work, you need to hit that play button, and that's it. That's going to bring this console over here, and it's a little bit convenient compared to VirtualBox. It's a little bit annoying, and my suggestion is that you minimize both screens, both windows, and you go straight into the welcome page available on the course environment, because actually you're going to start all the frameworks from this portal, and you're going to be able to shut it down as well, because this icon is much more convenient than shutting it down from the console itself. So let me leave the slide deck for one moment. So when it comes to the link to download that file, so you need to visit the GitHub repo. Then this is the zip file that I mentioned before. This is the hash number associated to this file using the SHA-256 algorithm. So that's a good practice to validate that the file you download is actually the file that I uploaded. So I already did it here on this machine, which is an Apple M3 based processor, so it ran super fast. But yeah, never mind. So I already ran it before. This is the number 8D35 ending by EC4E, which is actually what we already have over here, you see? So that means it is the same file, and we are ready to import it. So this is over here, then file. Before doing so, let me double check that I have 4.7.4. Yeah, there you go. And now I can file open, and oh yeah, before doing so, give me 1 second. I'm gonna open a new Finder. Yeah, it's over here. 1 second. There you go. So this is the zip file that I downloaded. I double click this file. I got this one over here after some minutes. And this is actually the file that I'm going to import. So once you import it, this file is actually a folder. Inside this folder, you will have all the artifacts for the virtual machine. So that means you can remove this zip file and you're gonna bring 10 gigs back to your computer. So in total, we have we have more than 30 gigs. And as we start adding stuff into our course environment, this number is going to go up. So if you are tight on disk available disk space, then probably it's a good practice or a good idea to remove this file. And if you need it in the future, you can download it one more time and then you unzip it and remove it one more time. All right, so file, open. Documents, yeah, this is the UTM file. And there you go. So you click the play button. You're gonna have these two windows, these two annoying windows. You're gonna see the blue box with the different options to put this up, and eventually you will get these two lines. So you can minimize both because you don't need it. You don't need them, and you can access the welcome page by clicking this link. And there you go. Once you're done, you click this icon and then you will see that the virtual machine is no longer running. So definitely you can close this window as well and you can move on with the rest of the stuff you are working on. Once the environment is properly deployed and started, so it's time to take the first steps. Definitely the first thing to do is to explore the welcome page, which is available on this link, which is localhost 2026. More on this in a moment. You will see the welcome message and then some tiles, some boxes with a couple of icons, the information icon and the UI icon. So those technologies with an user interface are going to have this UI icon. There are some technologies with more than one user interface, as it is the case of Hadoop. This UI is the HDFS UI. This is the Yarn UI. Then you have a couple of icons. And then you have a switch. The switch is going to be the way to start and stop every single technology. There are a couple of technologies that are up and running from the very beginning, which is Jupyter and Spark, because these are the technologies that we are using all the time, therefore it makes sense to have them up and running. If you click the information icon, you will see more information about the technology itself, the version, how to start it up, if you need to run it manually. So you don't see it here in Jupyter because it's always up and running, but so we will see another example. Then you will have the URL to access the technology itself, and if it has some credentials assigned to get into it, then you will have the username and the password. So Jupyter is the most convenient one to access the other technologies, such as Kafka, for instance, or leveraging Spark through Python and PySpark. And so that's why it's going to be up and running all the time. You can go into more details of what the technology is all about. I'll link to the project website just in case you're curious about that technology and what you want to explore further, and some additional notes that are relevant. And yeah, so be curious. Once you have it up and running, explore the different technologies, give it a try. And yeah, so this is basically what I do with my students. So let me leave the slides. Let me jump into the GitHub repo one more time. This is the release. You just scroll down, you will get into this link, which is going to take you to the welcome page. There you go. So as I already mentioned before, Jupyter is up and running. You cannot switch it off. So that doesn't make sense in this course environment. And if you click this UI icon, it's going to take you straight into Jupyter. If for whatever reason you already have a local Jupyter notebook, that's fine. So you can see that I'm configuring this Jupyter Lab deployment on a different DCP port. So you have it over here. If for whatever reason you want to interact with the terminal rather than using the console that we saw before, you can start using this one. So if you are into Linux, you want to learn Linux, probably this is something that you can start doing right away. All right, what else? So let's look into the different technologies. So actually, you're going to see all the technologies that I already introduced: Jupyter, NiFi, Hadoop, Spark, Kafka, this Drag Fleet Simulator that I used when I was working at Hortonworks. Very convenient, excuse me. And this is what I use for the real-time labs that we go through in my courses. MariaDB, relational database, Superset, BA tool, MongoDB, NoSQL, MinIO, object store, cast orchestration, Grafana, operational visualization, operational BI, application monitoring, infrastructure monitoring, whatever it is, ClickHouse, the blazing fast columnar database out there. So yeah, great technology. And last but not least, open metadata for governance and data quality. So imagine that you want to play around with ClickHouse. So I'm shipping just the database. There isn't any UI at all because I want to have a very lightweight virtual machine. So yeah, you want to use ClickHouse, switch it on, and then you can use the CLI, ClickHouse client, and there you go. So you have it over here, and then you can start using it right away. Let me make it bigger. So databases. So this is the super fancy CLI shipped with ClickHouse, and so you can actually double check the version like this. Yeah, you can do plenty of things with open source ClickHouse, and definitely you want to do something production class or something like that, so definitely you should be targeting ClickHouse Cloud. And there you go. So happy new year from ClickHouse. Yeah, very well educated technology, I would say. All right, so once you're done, you switch it off and you're done. So let's try Grafana. So let's see, let's switch it on, and so let's look into it. As you can see, you can actually, if for whatever reason the switch is not working, you can do it, you can run it manually through the terminal window. So that's something you could do over here. You could do something like sudo service Grafana server status, and so as you can see, it's up and running. So we don't have to do anything manually. Then this is the link to access Grafana, which is exactly the same link that you have in the information icon, and these are the credentials: admin OSBDET $123, which is the password that I try to set up in every single technology just to avoid messing things up. So same password for everything. It's an educational environment, so it makes sense to have very weak passwords. And then link to the project, some descriptions and stuff. So let me click over here, Grafana, admin, OSBDET, $123. I'm not going to save it for the moment. And there you go. So an amazing Grafana deployment. So I don't like the dark mode. You can easily switch into the light mode. And yeah, no connection. So it's a vanilla Grafana deployment without any configuration. And yeah, so you can do whatever you want to do with it. And once you're done, close it and go back to the main page. And once it's loaded, then the switch is going to be responsive one more time, and you can switch it off. So actually, if I click the UI icon right now, you will get this error because it's no longer running. Then you can stop the course environment, the virtual machine, the way I mentioned before. but probably the easiest way to do so, and actually it's going to be a very convenient way, so it's going to be homogeneous across the two versions of the virtual machines, is by clicking this button. So you click this button, and then that's going to close the virtual machine. So you refresh this welcome page, you will see that you get an error because the course environment is no longer running. All right, so you managed to get to this point. Congratulations, you made it work. Good job. And so yeah, I hope you enjoy it. And if you find issues or you find things that could be improved, feel free to reach out. I would be more than happy to get your feedback, and I would be more than happy to get your contribution. Bye for now, and one more time, Happy New Year, and all the best for this new year that is starting right now. Bye.